Most people grab sausage the same way they grab milk, without thinking. It's breakfast, it's lunch, it's a barbecue staple, it's convenient protein. You've probably been buying the same brand for years without ever opening the package to see what's actually inside. That's the problem. Sausage is one of the most deceptively engineered meat products in the entire grocery store, and the deception starts not with what's listed on the label, but with what you assume is listed on the label. You think you're buying ground meat with spices. What you're often buying is a combination of meat byproducts, textured plant proteins, binding agents, and flavor compounds engineered to taste like sausage while containing far less actual meat than the branding suggests. This video is going to walk you through the biggest mistakes people make when buying sausage, then show you exactly how to audit what you're actually purchasing, and finally reveal which brands are still making sausage the way sausage is supposed to be made. The first mistake most people make is confusing sausage categories without realizing it. Sausage is not a regulated product the way hamburger is. Ground beef must be at least 70% beef by USDA standards, and that's it. But sausage has no such requirement. A sausage can contain as little meat as the manufacturer wants, provided the total content meets certain broad classifications. A pork sausage might be 30% pork, 30% pork byproducts, 20% water, and 20% other approved ingredients. The label says pork sausage. Your brain reads pork sausage and assumes it's mostly pork. The formulation suggests otherwise. This gap between what the label promises and what the formulation delivers is the foundation of the entire sausage category problem. The second mistake is not reading the ingredient list at all. If you've ever bought a sausage and just looked at the front, you've missed the actual product entirely. The front of a sausage package is pure marketing, imagery of fresh meat, heritage language, family recipes, farm-to-table positioning. The back of the sausage package tells the actual story, and that story, in most mainstream brands, is one of systematic ingredient replacement. Real sausage contains meat, salt, and spices. Modern sausage contains meat, salt, spices, water, binding agents like cellulose, textured vegetable proteins, curing agents like sodium nitrite, flavor compounds including MSG, textured plant fibers, and sometimes corn syrup. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry experiment, not a traditional sausage formula. Most people have never looked at this list because they assume sausage is simple. It isn't. The third mistake is not understanding what meat byproducts actually are. When a sausage lists pork byproducts or mechanically separated pork, you probably think it sounds worse than it is. In reality, meat byproducts are legitimate food ingredients. They include organs, connective tissue, and trimmings that are perfectly edible and nutritious. The issue isn't that they're inedible. The issue is that they're cheaper than whole meat, and they're being used to reduce the amount of actual muscle tissue in the sausage while maintaining the sausage label and the meat positioning. You're paying meat prices for a product that contains significant byproduct content. That's the actual problem. The fourth mistake is assuming higher price means higher quality. Some of the most deceptive sausages on the market are premium price products that use the same industrial formulation as budget brands, just in fancier packaging. The price difference is branding, not ingredient quality. You'll pay more for heritage imagery and rustic packaging, while the formula is identical to a sausage half the price. The premium positioning actually makes the deception more effective because you're more likely to trust the product when you've paid more for it. The fifth mistake is not understanding water content. Sausage can legally contain up to 30% water by weight. Most commercial sausages use this allowance to the maximum. Water doesn't add flavor, it doesn't add nutrition, it adds bulk. When you cook a sausage loaded with water, you're watching that water evaporate as the sausage shrinks. What looked like a full, substantial sausage in the package becomes noticeably smaller on the grill. The cooking process is revealing the actual meat content. It's lower than the package suggested. This is intentional. Water is cheap. It stretches the product. It makes the sausage feel fuller and heavier in the package, which makes it look like a better value. It's the opposite of a better value. The sixth mistake is not questioning the texture. Real sausage has a bite to it. The meat fibers create a certain resistance when you bite down. Mass-produced industrial sausage often has a softer, more uniform texture because it's been homogenized. The meat is ground to a fine paste, mixed with water and binding agents, and formed into links. There's no actual meat structure remaining. It's all been broken down and reconstituted. The texture you're experiencing is the binding agents creating a smooth uniformity. Your mouth is telling you this isn't a traditionally made sausage, but you're interpreting that smoothness as tender instead of recognizing it as a sign of industrial processing. The seventh mistake is the one that ties all of these together. Not asking whether this sausage would spoil without refrigeration. If a sausage is shelf-stable or has an extraordinarily long refrigerated shelf life, it's been engineered for preservation, not for flavor or nutrition. Traditional sausage has a limited shelf life because it contains meat that will eventually spoil. Modern industrial sausage has an extended shelf life because it contains preservatives like sodium nitrite, sodium nitrate, and sometimes other antimicrobial compounds. These aren't bad ingredients necessarily, but they indicate that the formula has been optimized for industrial distribution and long-term shelf appeal, not for quality. Now let's audit the 7 sausage brands that most visibly exemplify these mistakes so you can understand exactly what you're buying and why it matters. Jimmy Dean Premium Pork Sausage represents the classic mistake. The packaging uses heritage imagery and family recipe language. The brand has been around for decades, which creates a false sense of tradition. But the ingredient list reveals a straightforward industrial formula: pork, water, salt, spices, and then corn syrup, sodium phosphate for texture, sodium nitrite for preservation, and FD&C red number 40. The second ingredient is water. This is a sausage where water makes up a significant percentage of the weight before it's even cooked. When you cook this sausage, you're cooking off that water and watching the actual meat content become apparent. Jimmy Dean sells the idea of quality tradition. The formulation delivers industrial efficiency. Tyson breakfast sausage takes a different approach to the same problem. This is budget sausage positioned as value. The ingredient list includes pork, water, salt, spices, dextrose, and then sodium phosphate, sodium nitrite, and BHA for preservation. The presence of BHA butylated hydroxyanisole is notable because it's a synthetic antioxidant that some consumers actively avoid. The sausage is lighter and airier than Jimmy Dean, which means it contains more water and binding agents creating that texture. You're paying less, but you're getting less meat and more processing. Johnsonville Original Recipe feels premium. The packaging is carefully designed to suggest craft and tradition. The brand positions itself as a Wisconsin heritage product. The ingredient list tells a different story: pork, water, salt, corn syrup, spices, and then sodium phosphate, sodium nitrite, and citric acid. This is an industrial sausage in premium packaging. The water content is significant. The corn syrup adds sweetness and extends shelf life. The sodium compounds are standard preservation ingredients. Johnsonville has built a brand reputation that far exceeds what the formulation would suggest if you were buying it blind, without the brand label. Hillshire Farm smoked sausage is interesting because it uses smoke flavoring instead of actual smoking. The ingredient list includes pork, water, salt, spices, corn syrup, and then sodium phosphate, sodium erythorbate, sodium nitrite, and smoke flavoring. The smoke flavoring is synthetic. It's not coming from actual smoke exposure. The sausage is being preserved and flavored through industrial methods that create the appearance of traditional smoking without the actual process. You're buying the idea of smoked sausage without the reality. Ballpark Frank's smoked beef sausage represents another variation of the same pattern. This is a sausage designed for convenience and consistent cooking. The ingredient list includes beef, water, corn syrup, salt, spices, sodium phosphate, sodium nitrite, sodium erythorbate, and again, smoke flavoring. The beef content is significant, but the water is equally significant. The formula is optimized for package consistency and cooking predictability, not for flavor depth or ingredient quality. Eckrich smoked sausage follows the same template, but with slightly different ingredient emphasis: pork, water, salt, corn syrup, spices, sodium phosphate, sodium erythorbate, sodium nitrite, and flavoring. This is one of the oldest sausage brands in America, which creates brand loyalty that has no correlation to formulation quality. The product has been industrialized and reformulated repeatedly over the decades, but the brand positioning remains rooted in heritage. You're buying nostalgia, not quality. Oscar Mayer pork sausage completes this group as a classic mass-market product. The ingredient list is straightforward industrial: pork, water, salt, corn syrup, spices, dextrose, sodium phosphate, sodium nitrite, and BHA. This is budget sausage in budget packaging. There's no premium positioning, no heritage language, no craft branding. It's purely functional food, designed to be cheap, shelf-stable, and consistent. What's interesting is that it's often more honest about what it is than premium brands, precisely because it doesn't use heritage marketing to create false expectations. Now let's establish a framework for understanding why these mistakes happen across the entire category, so you can apply this thinking not just to sausage, but to other meat products where the same patterns emerge. The sausage category has a cost structure problem. Traditional sausage, made from whole meat, seasoned with real spices, cased in natural casings, and actually smoked or air-cured, is expensive to make. It requires skilled labor, it requires time, it requires space and equipment for proper curing and smoking. It spoils quickly, which limits distribution. The profit margins are thin. This business model worked 100 years ago when sausage was a regional product made by local butchers. But it doesn't work at the modern industrial scale where sausage is distributed nationally and expected to remain shelf-stable for weeks. So manufacturers solve for cost by replacing expensive whole meat with cheaper byproducts, replacing water loss from traditional curing with added water, replacing natural smoking with smoke flavoring, replacing real spice blending with standardized flavor compounds, replacing natural casing with synthetic casing, and replacing actual aging with preservatives. The result is a product that tastes vaguely familiar. People recognize it as sausage, but contains almost nothing that resembles actual sausage in its original form. The branding fills in the gap between what the product actually is and what you expect it to be. This matters practically because of two consequences. First, you're paying meat prices for a product that's 30 to 40% water and processing additives. Second, the processing additives include compounds like sodium nitrite that are present for preservation, not for nutrition or flavor. These aren't poisons. They're approved food ingredients used in tiny quantities, but they indicate that the entire formula has been optimized for industrial manufacturing, not for human nutrition. Here's where this gets important. Understanding these mistakes teaches you how to audit any sausage you buy, starting right now. The first checkpoint is looking at the ingredient list before anything else. If water appears in the first 3 ingredients, you're buying a sausage with significant water content. If corn syrup appears, the sausage has been formulated with added sweetness, typically for preservation and flavor consistency. If sodium phosphate, sodium nitrite, and other curing salts appear, the sausage is being preserved through industrial preservation, not through traditional methods. If mechanically separated meat appears, the sausage contains finely ground meat paste created through industrial processing. If textured vegetable protein or cellulose appears, plant-based binding agents are being used to replace meat. If flavor compounds like MSG or smoke flavoring appear, the sausage is being chemically flavored rather than traditionally prepared. The second checkpoint is understanding the actual meat percentage. The label won't tell you directly, but you can infer it. If water is the second ingredient, meat is probably 30 to 40%. If meat is the only ingredient listed before water, it's probably 50% or higher. If the sausage lists pork as the first ingredient, but then lists pork byproducts as the third or fourth ingredient, the sausage is engineered to make you read pork first, while burying the byproduct content further down. This is intentional label design. The third checkpoint is the texture test. Real sausage has a certain firmness and bite. If a sausage feels uniform and smooth with no resistance, it's been homogenized. This isn't necessarily bad, but it indicates industrial processing. If a sausage has visible texture variation and feels like actual meat when you bite down, it's probably made from larger meat particles and less processing. The fourth checkpoint is looking for brand positioning that contradicts the formulation. If the packaging emphasizes heritage, tradition, family recipes, or craft, but the ingredient list is industrial and standardized, that's a brand positioning gap. The packaging is selling you an idea that the product doesn't deliver. Now let's shift to the 3 sausage brands that are actually making sausage the way sausage should be made. These represent a completely different approach to the category. Nueske's hickory smoked sausage is the foundational example of a genuinely traditional sausage. The ingredient list is remarkably short. Pork, salt, spices, and hickory smoke. That's it. Water doesn't appear because this sausage isn't engineered to be shelf-stable. It requires refrigeration and has a limited shelf life. The smoke is actual smoke exposure, not synthetic smoke flavoring. The sausage is made in small batches using whole meat and traditional curing methods. When you cook this sausage, it doesn't shrink dramatically because it doesn't contain excess water. The meat is the star of the formula. The price is significantly higher than mass-market sausages. But you're paying for actual ingredients and actual labor, not for packaging and branding. Hempler's natural pork sausage takes a similar approach with slightly different positioning. The ingredient list: pork, salt, spices, and natural smoke flavor. The word natural here is important. The smoke flavor is derived from actual smoke compounds, not from synthetic flavor compounds. The sausage contains no water, no corn syrup, no sodium phosphate, no synthetic preservatives. It's made from pork and spices, cured and smoked traditionally. The texture is noticeably different from industrial sausages. It's firmer, with visible meat structure. The sausage doesn't feel uniform because it isn't. It's actual meat, not homogenized paste. The Herbury small batch sausage represents a newer generation of craft sausage makers who are reviving traditional methods at small scale. The ingredient list might include pork, salt, spices, and perhaps one traditional ingredient like fennel or sage. The sausage is made in small batches, it requires refrigeration, it has a limited shelf life. The brand doesn't use heritage marketing because the product proves itself through ingredient simplicity and actual quality. When you taste this sausage, the difference from mass-market alternatives is immediately obvious. The spice profile is complex, the texture is alive, the meat flavor is strong. What these 3 sausages share is this: they're built on the principle that sausage should taste like meat and spices, not like processed food engineering. They cost more because they require more labor and more expensive ingredients. They don't have extended shelf lives because they aren't preserved through additives. They aren't distributed nationally because they spoil too quickly. They're regional or mail-order products, not supermarket staples. And they taste entirely different from what you've probably been eating. The buying framework that emerges from this comparison is straightforward. Start by examining the ingredient list. If meat is the first ingredient and water doesn't appear in the first 3, you're probably looking at a legitimate sausage. If you see corn syrup, sodium phosphate, smoke flavoring, or other processing compounds, you're looking at an engineered product. That doesn't mean you can't buy it. Engineered sausages are convenient and consistent, but you should be aware of what you're buying. The second rule is recognizing that price correlates with formulation, not just branding. If a sausage costs significantly more than budget alternatives, you're paying for different ingredients. If the packaging is significantly fancier but the ingredient list is identical to a cheaper brand, you're paying for design, not quality. The third rule is understanding the texture. If a sausage is uniform and smooth, it's been processed extensively. If it has texture variation and firmness, it's probably made from larger meat particles. Neither is objectively better, but the texture tells you something about the manufacturing method. The fourth rule is checking the shelf life promise. If a sausage has a very long refrigerated shelf life, it's been preserved through additives. If it has a short shelf life, a few days, it's probably made without heavy preservation. Again, neither is inherently bad, but the shelf life indicates the formula's focus. This summer, as you're buying sausage for breakfast, for grilling, for meal prep, you have a choice. You can continue buying the familiar brands and the brands you've been buying for years, understanding now that they're engineered products optimized for cost and shelf stability. That's a valid choice if you make it consciously. Or you can seek out sausages made from actual ingredients with actual traditional methods, accepting that they'll cost more and require more careful handling. The difference in taste is not subtle. Once you've eaten a sausage made from meat and spices without water and additives, the mass-market alternatives start to taste like what they are. Food engineering designed to be cheap, convenient, and consistent. The wider pattern here is that sausage is not unique. This same engineering approach, replacing expensive whole ingredients with cheaper byproducts and additives, using water to stretch the product, using processing compounds to extend shelf life, using heritage branding to create confidence that the formulation doesn't warrant, exists across virtually all processed meat products. Bacon, ham, deli meat, ground meat products, all of them follow the same cost reduction logic. You apply this same label reading discipline to bacon, and suddenly you start seeing the same water content, the same preservatives, the same ingredient replacement happening across the entire category. Here's what I want you to do. Open your refrigerator. Find the sausage you've been buying. Look at the ingredient list. Count the ingredients. How many are actual meat? How many are water or additives? Now look at that shelf life date. Consider how much water must be in that product to make it shelf-stable this long. Then ask yourself whether you're buying sausage or whether you're buying a product that tastes like sausage. What brand have you been buying for years without looking at the ingredient list? Have you ever actually looked at what's in your sausage, or have you just grabbed the same package every time? Which of these brands do you recognize from your own kitchen right now? And now that you know what's actually happening in the sausage aisle, what are you going to do differently next time you're shopping? Drop your current sausage brand in the comments. Look at that ingredient list tonight, and let's talk about what you actually find in there.